Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webcast today on the future of 3270 terminal emulation. My name is Yvonne Wheaton, and I will be your moderator today. I represent Software Diversified Services. Software Diversified Services is a global leader in mainframe software. It's been named to the Cybersecurity 500 list of the world's hottest and most innovative cybersecurity companies for second quarter of 2017. Founded in 1982, SDS is a Minnesota-based company that has a 35-year history of offering security, encryption, data compression, and network monitoring customer-centric IT infrastructure solutions. SDS is an IBM partner in development and an advanced member of IBM Partner World. We're pleased to be presenting today's webcast with our partner SysperTec, whom we have various product offerings in the Virtel Web Suite. You can find out more at www.sdsusa.com. In recent years, users of Java Applet-Based 3270 terminal emulation started realizing that it was time to migrate to a thin client browser-based 3270 terminal emulator to simplify support, reduce cost, and support new client device technologies. But before deciding on your next 3270 terminal emulation solution, you should realize there are two types of thin client browser-based 3270 terminal emulation architectures. And the unique simplicity of Virtel's two-tier architecture remains a key differentiator when compared to the three-tier architecture of its competitors. In this webcast presentation, Patrick Fournier from SysperTec will discuss the benefits of thin client browser-based 3270 terminal emulators over traditional Java Applet-based 3270 terminal emulators. Discuss the benefits of two-tier over three-tier architecture for thin client browser-based 3270 terminal emulators, and provide an overview of Virtel Web Access, which is both a thin client browser-based and a two-tier 3270 terminal emulator. He currently serves as a solution architect for the Virtel Web Suite, which is published by SysperTec. So it's my pleasure to now hand the presentation over to Patrick Fournier. Patrick?
Hi, my name is Patrick Fournier. I am a Virtel solution architect with SysperTec. Today I am going to discuss different types of 3270 terminal emulation architectures. First, thin client versus thick client architectures, and then two-tier versus three-tier thin client architectures. I will then introduce our own terminal emulator, Virtel Web Access, which relies on a thin client two-tier architecture. In this segment, we will compare thin client versus thick client terminal emulators. Thick client terminal emulators exchange 3270 data with client devices through Telnet 3270 connections. On the client devices, applets, typically Java applets, convert the 3270 data into 3270 screens. The Java applets run in Java virtual machines, which themselves run under Windows or Linux. This is how thick client terminal emulators work. Thin client terminal emulators send HTML JavaScript pages to client devices through SSL encrypted HTTPS connections. The 3270 data is embedded in the HTML JavaScript pages. The pages look and behave the same as genuine 3270 screens. On a client device, they are rendered by the client's web browser. Any web browser running under any OS can render those HTML JavaScript pages. This is how thin client 3270 terminal emulators work. One of the main benefits of the thin client architecture is that it makes the installation, administration, and support of the solution much simpler because it's all centralized. You don't have to install, administer, or support anything on remote client devices. No Java components, no applets. As for deployment, it couldn't be simpler. All you have to do is point your web browser to an installation-defined URL and port, and you will reach the logon menu. Simplifying the installation, support, and administration frees up time for the support team, who can focus on more creative tasks. With a thin client solution, the desktop team doesn't need to get involved any longer because there is nothing to install or support on the client devices, no Java components and no applets. Another key benefit of the thin client architecture is that it supports any web client technology. Whether your users have PC workstations, Mac workstations, laptops, notebooks, tablets, smartphones, regardless of the operating system or web browser on those devices, the thin client solution works. That is very convenient if you're in a BYOD, that is, bring your own device environment, whether formal or informal, and users start deploying any client device they want. You don't have to worry about the solution working. It will work. As for the lifespan, you're guaranteed that the solution will work as long as web browsers can render HTML JavaScript pages, which is what they will do for the foreseeable future. Another key benefit of the thin client architecture is that it relies on SSL encrypted HTTPS connections, typically compliant with the latest FIPS and TLS levels. Today, FIPS 142 and TLS 1.2 or soon 1.3. With an SSL encrypted HTTPS connection, you don't need a VPN. You can have one if you want, but the VPN will essentially encrypt data that is already encrypted, which is redundant. You also don't have to worry about components installed on client devices getting compromised, because with a thin client architecture, there are no such components. In the case of our own thin client 3270 emulator, Virtel, even user-created macros can be stored centrally on the host instead of on the client devices where they could be compromised or misused. Another benefit of the thin client architecture is that it facilitates the implementation of Virtual Device Infrastructure, or VDI, initiatives. As illustrated on the slide, client workstation will be ultra-thin in a not-so-distant future. The software installed on those workstations will be limited to operating system, web browser, a toolbar to access cloud applications, and in some instances, a remote desktop applet for remote support, a browser extension for a cloud application like Salesforce, an applet or plugin like the Citrix receiver to access Office Suite or intranet applications in the Citrix cloud. With a thin client 3270 emulator, mainframe application look and or access like any other cloud applications via the client's web browser. Finally, one of the side benefits of the thin client architecture is that it makes it fairly easy to merge an emulated 3270 screen inside the GUI of a web application, because both the 3270 terminal emulation and the GUI pages are made of HTML JavaScript code. They are consistent in nature. We've done that recently for a customer where the 3270 screen is rendered in an iframe inside the GUI pages. We even synchronize the two interfaces via a shared field, in that case an account number, so that if and when a user changes account in the 3270 screen interface, the GUI automatically positions to the new account, and vice versa. Both interfaces auto-synchronize on each other. You can do something like that with a thin client solution and its Java applet, but you will need a Java plugin for the browser, and as you know, modern web browsers no longer support Java plugins. So you won't be able to deploy Edge, Chrome, or Firefox. You will be instead restricted to Internet Explorer, which is the only web browser that still supports Java plugins. In this segment, we will compare two-tier and three-tier architectures for thin client 3270 terminal emulation emulators. Most thin client browser-based 3270 terminal emulators rely on a three-tier architecture where a TN3270 server runs as a started task on the mainframe in a ZOS or ZVSC LPAR, where it performs a first protocol conversion from SNA to TN3270. That's tier number one. The TN3270 server connects via a Telnet 3270 connection with a 3270 terminal emulator, which runs on a middle tier server, typically a Windows or Linux server, where it performs a second protocol conversion from TN3270 to HTTP. That's tier number two. The 3270 terminal emulator connects via an HTTP connection with the web client devices, where the client's browsers render the terminal emulation page. And that's tier number three. Note that the middle tier server is oftentimes virtualized, so it actually runs in a Linux or Windows LPAR on the mainframe. Our product Virtel Web Access is the only two-tier thin client 3270 terminal emulator that we know of. With a two-tier solution like Virtel, it's simpler because there is no middle tier server. Virtel runs as a started task on the mainframe in a ZOS or ZVSC LPAR, where it converts the SNA exchanges with VTAM and the 3270 applications into HTTP data exchanges with the web client devices through a single protocol conversion. That's our tier number one. Virtel connects through an HTTP connection with the web client devices, where the client's browsers render the terminal emulation page. That's tier number two. Now on to Virtel internals. Virtel interfaces with VTAM through an integrated VTAM relay. From VTAM point of view, Virtel is just another 3270 terminal. But behind Virtel VTAM relay are a protocol conversion engine between mainframe and web technologies and an integrated IP server, which in the case of a 3270 terminal emulation is an HTTP server. Let me repeat. The HTTP server is an integral part of the Virtel product. It comes with the Virtel product. Virtel doesn't need a third-party HTTP server to function, as is often asked by our prospects. Note that Virtel can also be fitted with an SMTP server for emailing applications, or with a custom IP server for other custom web enablement applications. Virtel Web Access comes with vendor-provided scenarios and templates that make Virtel behave as a 3270 terminal emulator. Virtel scenarios control the internal logic of the web enabling application, and Virtel templates control the presentation and layout of the data coming off Virtel. Now, with a product running in a ZOS LPAR, the first question that comes to mind is always, is it going to increase my CPU consumption and consequently my cost? And the answer is no. Virtel's footprint is just about the same as that of the TN3270 server it replaces. We benchmarked it to be sure. Virtel does consume a little bit more than a TN3270 server, but the difference is quite neglectable. 0.1 to 0.5% of your MSU cap. If you have any concern, you can run Virtel in an LPAR that is not busy, and nowhere it's MSU cap, because Virtel works across LPARs and across Sysplex. It doesn't need to run in the same LPAR as the application it provides access to. So how come Virtel footprint be so small? It's because Virtel doesn't have much to do on the host. It just inserts the data coming off VTAM into a pre-existing web page template and then serves that page to the client via Virtel's integrated HTTP server. In doing so, it performs a single protocol conversion, which is exactly what the TN3270 server that Virtel replaces does. The smarts of the Virtel of the terminal emulation are in the HTML JavaScript code of the web pages that Virtel serves to the web clients, and that code runs in the client's web browsers, not on the mainframe host. Also, Virtel is coded in high-level assembler rather than Java to give it the shortest possible footprint. Now, with 3-tier solutions, you need to take into account the additional footprint of the Windows or Linux LPARs in which the middle tier server runs if it is virtualized. It's not as costly as a ZOS LPAR, but you nevertheless have to pay for it. And if the middle tier server is not virtualized, there is still somewhere a cost to run that server. So when it comes to the mainframe footprint, a 2-tier solution has same or smaller overall footprint than a 3-tier solution with virtualized middle tier server, and it won't impact the footprint related costs. When it comes to performances and response times, a 2-tier solution will always have better performance and shorter response time than a 3-tier solution. Always. This is because the 2-tier solution doesn't have a middle tier server sitting between the ZOS LPAR and a client device. With 2-tier solution, you only have one protocol conversion from SNA to HTTP, whereas with a 3-tier solution, you have 2 protocol conversions. First, a conversion from SNA to Telnet 3270, and then another conversion from Telnet 3270 to HTTP. And those protocol conversions definitely impact the overall response time. In addition, 3-tier terminal emulators can be sometimes coded in Java, and Java is the best language when it comes to response times. Instead, Virtel is coded in high-level assembler, which gives it similar performances to the TN3270 server that it replaces. So when it comes to the performance and response time, a 2-tier solution has a definite advantage over 3-tier solutions. Let's focus now on installation, administration, and support. With a 2-tier solution like Virtel, you only have to install, administer, and support one solution component, the 3270 terminal emulation product itself. The administration and support are all done in the same place, the product's configuration menus. And it's all done by one customer team, the System Z technical support team, with one vendor, support from one vendor. So instead, with a 3-tier solution, you must install, administer, and support additional components, namely a physical or virtual middle tier server, its operating system, and a Java or Node.js machine. The administration and support are done in several places, and they require several customer teams and several vendor teams to get involved. So when it comes to installation, administration, and support, the 2-tier solution is definitely simpler than the 3-tier solution. a two-tier solution is also stronger and easier to debug than a three-tier solution. This is because with Virtel, it all happens is one place. That's one solution component, one potential point of failure, one skill set required to analyze and understand the situation, and one support team, the System Z technical support team, to understand and debug the situation if one arises. Instead, with a three-tier solution, the multiple solution components create multiple points of failure, and you will need multiple skill sets, multiple support teams to debug a situation if one arises. When it comes to securing the access to a host application, both 2 and 3-tier 3270 terminal emulators can integrate with third-party access control systems such as SSO, LDAP, multi-factor authentication, SAML, and U2F. But being a two-tier architecture makes it a bit easier to get pass tickets from the host secure access facility because you're running in a host helper next to the host secure access facility, RICF, ACF2, top secret. It also makes it easier to create an SMF access audit trail because you're running on the host mainframe. With a two-tier solution, there is only one connection between the host and the client, and that's an end-to-end SSL encrypted connection. Virtel relies on IBM's ATTLS or ICSF for encryption. It guarantees compliance with FIPS 140.2 and TLS 1.2 and compliance with future FIPS and TLS levels such as the upcoming TLS 1.3 as well. With a three-tier solution, it's a bit more complicated because now you have two different types of connections. Between the middle tier server and the client device, you have an HTTP connection which will have to be encrypted. And you need to make sure that the encryption engine guarantees compliance with today's and future FIPS and TLS levels. And then on the TN3270 server, on that side, you have a Telnet 3270 connection, which means that if your middle tier server is not virtualized and therefore not hosted on the mainframe, you will need to either implement the TN3270 encryption or protect the connection with a VPN to encrypt the data. And of course, a VPN is one more third-party product that needs to be licensed and supported. So when it comes to encryption, a two-tier solution has a clear advantage over a three-tier solution because it can leverage IBM's ATTLS or ICSF. Virtel provides the tools to filter the data on the mainframe before the data ever leaves the mainframe. It prevents hidden fields from ever leaving the mainframe and verifies that protected fields come back unchanged from the client devices, whereas solutions that rely on Telnet 3270 connections send hidden fields outside the mainframe and do not verify that protected fields come back unchanged to the mainframe. This is a well-documented security flaw which has been exploited by hackers. Virtel also provides the means to develop custom data filters that operate on the mainframe before the data ever leaves the mainframe. For example, you can mask confidential data such as credit card numbers, social security numbers, HIPAA-protected data, or even entire screens, and base your data masking on the user's credential so that different levels of data can be shared with management, IT staff, business associate, and other credential levels. When it comes to data filtering, A two-tier solution has therefore a clear advantage over a three-tier solution because it filters the data on the mainframe before the data ever gets out of the mainframe. At Logon, Virtel leverages the fact that it runs on the host to determine from the host system authorization facility, RICF, ACF2, top secret, the list of applications that a user is authorized to access based on that user's logon credentials. Then Virtel serves this list to the user in the form of a user-specific application selection menu. When you combine this with the possibility to open multiple browser tabs or to start multiple browser instances, Virtel's application selection menu works as a simple session manager. If you prefer, you can bypass this facility by bringing users directly to their user's good morning screen or to a third-party session manager. But Virtel comes by default with this free and integrated session manager. It's a little bit more complicated with a three-tier solution because you have to either use a VTAM logon table or multiple table telnet definitions, in which case you will have to rely on multiple TN3270 connections, whereas Virtel relies on only one HTTP connection. Or, as is most often the case, you will have to rely on a third-party session manager, a product sitting between VTAM and the 3270 server, which you will have, of course, to license and support. So when it comes to session manager, a two-tier solution has a clear advantage over a three-tier solution because the session management is integrated and free of charge. There is a very significant difference between Virtel and any other 3270 terminal emulators when it comes to macros. Traditionally, macros have been created and managed by users with no oversight from the IT community. They are stored on the client devices, therefore IT has no reliable inventory. There is no institutionalized macro sharing between users, lots of duplication, no security audit. But macros are an application extension which is quite valuable because they add productivity to the application user interface, and yet they are not owned or controlled by IT or application support staff, and we think that this is wrong. With Virtel, you can do the same. You can have local storage and management of your macros by any users if that's what you really want to do. But you also have the option, which we prefer, to have the Virtel administrator make it so that the macros are stored in a centralized repository on the host. To the end user, it's totally transparent. They don't realize that. But with centralized storage, the macros can be made global, group, or personal macros. Global macros can be seen and used by anyone, so they're shared by anyone. Group macros can be seen and used and shared by any group member, and those groups are like predefined RICF user groups. And personal macros can only be seen and used by the person who developed them. So now you have a consistent and complete inventory of your macros. You can share them rather than duplicate them. You can have a security audit, and the administrator can deny some macros, for example, macros with unencrypted logon credentials, user IDs and passwords, or macros that would activate thousands and thousands of CICS transactions from a mere Excel spreadsheet. These kind of macros are very dangerous to the host assets, but if they are in a centralized repository, the administrator can identify and reject them, reject all the macros that create an exposure for the host asset. So when it comes to macros, Virtel has a clear advantage over other terminal emulators because it allows storing and managing the macros on the host rather than on distributed client devices. Virtel is priced competitively compared to any other 3270 terminal emulators. But for a complete cost comparison, you cannot limit yourself to the terminal emulator licensing and support cost. You need to take into account the extra components of the three-tier solution, that is, the software licensing and support costs for the TN3270 server, the Telnet connection, the Java or Node.js machine, the Windows or Linux operating system, and the LPOR in which you virtualize the middle tier server. All those components that should be taken into account when comparing a two-tier with a three-tier solution. When you do, you will find that Virtel has a clear advantage over its three-tier competitors. One of the key differences of Virtel, which comes from its internal design rather than the fact that it relies on a two-tier architecture, is its very high flexibility. Installing Virtel Web Access instantly converts the application's legacy screen interface into web pages with 3270 terminal emulation ergonomics, pages that can be rendered by any web browser running on any web client. But Virtel also comes with two IDEs, Virtel Studio and Virtel Screen Redesigner. Those IDEs allow developers to refine the interface's internal logic and presentation in order to convert the legacy screen interface into either a modern GUI, which we refer to as Virtel Web Modernization, or interactive bidirectional web or message services, which we refer to as Virtel Web Integration. Virtel even supports the eventual elimination of the 3270 screen interface from the underlying application and its replacement with a COM area or channel and container interface. The bottom line is that Virtel provides within a single product a simple and comprehensive modernization path for the host application's 3270 screen interface, something that other three-tier thin client emulator do not seem to offer. In this segment, we are going to turn our attention to Virtel Web Access, which is our thin client two-tier 3270 terminal emulator. Virtel Web Access is the base configuration in the Virtel Web Suite, a comprehensive product line to web-enable 3270 application. It has been in production for over 15 years, has about 150 references, including one with 400,000 users in 150 countries. In addition to Virtel Web Access, the Virtel Web Suite includes Virtel Web Modernization to replace 3270 screen user interfaces with modern GUIs, and Virtel Web Integration to create interactive bidirectional connections between web and mainframe application through web or message services. Virtel Web Access serves 3270 screens, such as those of CSES, IMS, and TSO, as HTML5 JavaScript web pages with 3270 terminal emulation ergonomics to thin clients straight off the mainframe without middle tier server. Virtel Web Access is typically licensed as a replacement for client-based 3270 terminal emulators. Virtel relies on a thin client, and some call it browser-based architecture. With Virtel, the client applet is replaced by a combination of the client's web browser and the web page that Virtel serves to that web browser. Virtel runs on the mainframe host, where it converts the screens of 3270 applications into HTML JavaScript web pages that can be rendered by any web browser running on any web-enabled device. Consequently, Virtel works instantly with any web client available today or tomorrow. Deploying Virtels couldn't be simpler. There is nothing to install on client devices and there are no middle-tier servers. You simply ask the users to point their web browsers to an installation-defined URL and port. And the administration and support of Virtel are also very simple because there are no client apps, no middle-tier servers, no Java components, and the administration and support are 100% host-based, mainframe host-based. Because Virtel doesn't rely on middle-tier servers or Java components, you don't have any of the issues typically associated with middle-tier servers or with Java components. Once authenticated, users are served by default a personalized application selection menu. On it, they see only those applications that they are authorized to access, with a green light if the application is up and running and a red light if the application is not available. This application selection menu, combined with the multi-tab capability of web browsers and with the possibility to run multiple web browser instances, works as a simple multi-session manager. Some Virtel customers have simply dropped their session manager. Then again, you can bypass the feature and take the users directly to the legacy section manager or to an application's good morning screen if preferred. Here is a sample of a 3270 terminal emulation web page as generated by Virtel Web Access. It looks and behaves exactly as a green screen. The toolbar at the top of the screen includes a virtual keyboard, a cut copy paste tool, a screenshot tool, a macro record and replay tool, access to documentation, the disconnect button, access to the setting menu, and I forgot the access to IND $file. The settings menu allows users to customize the screen appearance, remap the keyboard, and implement other such customization. So, how does Virtel work? Well, 3270 application interface with their users via legacy 3270 screens. Those screens are sent to the users via VTAM and NSNA connection. Virtel runs as a started task on the ZOS or DVSC system. It includes a VTAM relay. The VTAM relay has the smarts to interface with VTAM as if Virtel was a VTAM terminal. VTAM believes that it is interfacing a VTAM terminal when in fact it is interfacing the Virtel started task. Behind the VTAM relay is the core of Virtel, a protocol converter between host and web technologies. Behind it is an IP server. Virtel can be fitted with several IP servers. With Virtel Web Access, it is an HTTP server and it manages the HTTP connection with the client devices. At runtime, Virtel insert the 3270 application data coming off VTAM into an HTML JavaScript template to generate the 3270 terminal emulation web page, and Virtel send that web page to the client device. That web page can be rendered by any web browser running on any client device. And that's how Virtel Web Access works as a two-tier thin client 3270 terminal emulator. Note that you can develop your own scenarios and templates to convert the legacy 3270 screens into a modern GUI so that users will think that they are working with a web application when in fact they are interfacing and working with a legacy 3270 application. This type of configuration is referenced or referred to as Virtel Web Modernization. Then again, with custom developed scenarios and templates, Virtel can be used to develop interactive bidirectional communications between web and host applications through web or message services. This type of configuration is referred to as Virtel Web Integration. Now let's review a few customer stories, starting with Peugeot Citroën, the French car manufacturer. Back in 2003, Peugeot Citroën replaced the costly private SNA network that they used to access their global IMS application with secure internet accesses to reduce costs. They choose Virtel and its two-tier browser-based 3270 terminal emulation because deploying and supporting terminal emulation applets to 400,000 users in 150 countries worldwide would have been a very difficult and very costly endeavor. Although the term BYOD had not been coined yet in 2003, Peugeot Citroën were in effect already in a BYOD, a bring your own device environment, because they didn't control and didn't own the 400,000 client devices used to access their global IMS application. The support requirement and TCO of a client-based 3270 terminal emulation solution would have simply been horrendous. Today, Peugeot Citroën supports up to 16,000 concurrent users per Virtel product instance. They also take advantage of Virtel's integrated Unicode conversion facility to automatically convert back and forth the double byte character sets of terminal used in countries like Russia, Japan, China, and so on, to the single byte European character set used in the Peugeot Citroën IMS database. Now on to Crédit Agricole, which is a pretty good sized global bank. I think they're ranked number 16 or 17 in the world. They have been a Virtel customer since 2005. What is interesting with them is that they started with browser-based terminal emulation back in 2005. Also, they deployed from the get-go a customized CSS cascading style sheet so that their screens would look like a Crédit Agricole web portal, despite providing traditional 3270 terminal emulation ergonomics. In other words, the look, but not the smarts, of a modern GUI. Then they converted their screens to a basic GUI with all the typical widgets such as drop-down list, graphical calendar, checkboxes, and so on. Then in 2008, they added new functionalities to their web portal using Ajax technology and JavaScript and XML code insertions. This was all done without changing a single line of code in the underlying CICS applications. Finally, in 2011, after living without seeing their screens for a few years, they modified their CICS application code one program at a time to replace the screen user interface with COM areas. It was an internal plumbing, if you want, or repiping project, and the users didn't experience any change with their web portal. Nowadays, the screens are gone. The CICS applications no longer have a presentation layer. They no longer activate the presentation layers of CICS, and it reduces the CPU consumption and improves response times. Instead, they interface directly with Virtel via an API made of standard COBOL COM areas. PNV, they are the leading leading European insurance company based in Belgium. In 2010, they migrated to Virtel Web Access and to its browser-based 3270 terminal emulation in order to eliminate the Windows PC workstation that independent insurance agents had to use to market and support P&V insurance products. To protect the access to their CICS applications, P&V had to pre-install the software they wanted on the workstations and then to lock down the workstation so that no change could be made to them by the agents. Consequently, the workstation couldn't be used for anything else than accessing P&V applications. P&V independent insurance agents hated those workstations, the associated licensing fee, and the wasted desktop space. This being Europe, a number of them were using Mac workstations and tablets rather than Windows PC workstation, but the client-based terminal emulators that P&V was using at the time didn't support those devices. Those are the main reasons why P&V migrated from their client-based terminal emulator to Virtel Web Access. With Virtel, they didn't have to rely on provisioning and supporting those Windows PC workstations any longer. It resulted in a drastic reduction in support requirements and related costs, of course, while providing a secure access to P&V host applications because it eliminated the risk of compromised TN3270 Java applets and provided end-to-end secure SSL encryption. By the way, P&V is one of those customers who dropped their VPN. The agents welcomed the change because they no longer had to pay the licensing fees to work with P&V. They were able to free some desktop space and they were able to use a client device of their choice. And finally, Frequent, who manages the largest commercial vehicle fleet in Europe with 58,000 vehicles and 180 agencies in 15 countries. In 2017, Frequent completed a groundbreaking VDI, that is Virtual Device Infrastructure project, where they replaced 1,500 Windows workstation with ultra-thin Chrome devices. In this VDI configuration, all applications, including the mainframe host application, run in the cloud and are accessed via the Chrome web browser. A browser extension is still required to access the Salesforce CRM. A Citrix receiver applet is still required to access the Microsoft Office and Frequent Internet applications, and a remote desktop applet is still required to remotely support the workstations. But other than that, the only software installed on those ultralight Chrome devices are the Chrome OS and browser and a toolbar which is nothing more than a list of URL pointing to the Google Suite applications. The marketing and training documentation has been replaced with YouTube videos accessed via the Chrome browser, and with Virtel installed on the mainframe host, the host application are also accessed via the Chrome browser. Note that Frequent chose to migrate from Microsoft to Google products for political and economical reasons, but that everything they did with Google products could have been done with Microsoft products. We think that this VDI project illustrates what future client workstation will look like in a few years. Now, let's summarize the benefits that you get from migrating from a Java Applet-Based 3270 terminal emulator to a thin client browser-based two-tier solution like Virtel. You get, and that's my own personal non-scientific estimate, okay? But you get about 3/4 of your benefits from the thin client architecture because it brings simpler administration and support, improved security, and BYOD VDI cloud compatibility. It eliminates the reliance on Java applets. You will be able to easily integrate with the GUIs of your web applications, and in the end, you will lower your TCO. But then, you still get an extra 25% of benefits from the two-tier architecture because it makes the administration and support even simpler. It's more robust and easier to debug. It's more flexible and more evolutive, and it provides more modernization capabilities. It comes with an integrated session manager. There is no need for a VPN. You can store and manage your macros on the host, and in the end, it will further lower your TCO. So our product, Virtel Web Access, is both thin client and two-tier, so you get full benefits. Note that Virtel was designed as a thin client two-tier solution from the get-go back in the early 2000s and has been used in global organizations, banks, car manufacturers, and so on for over 15 years, whereas Virtel's web-based competitors have only been announced recently. That is, I believe, in the past 4 years or so, one of them last year, by vendors who until then were selling their now outdated client-based solutions. Virtel customer never had to migrate to a new solution, whereas the customers of those vendors who have recently come up with web-based solution have for many years had to deal with the inconvenience of client-based solutions, especially those solutions relying on Java applets, and they are now faced with the need to switch to web-based technology. While they migrate to web-based technology, maybe those customers should consider migrating to a two-tier solution so that they never had to deal with middle-tier servers and so that they instead get the full benefit of a thin client two-tier solution. Thank you for attending. I will now hand over to Yvonne Wheaton. This concludes my presentation of the differences between 2- and 3-tier web-based 3270 emulation.